Hello students, welcome back to the Analyst for 19th of March 2024, where we will be trying to understand the most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Now looking at the very first article, it is about a recent free trade agreement signed between India and the EFTA. In the next one, we will be looking at a very burning issue, that is with respect to the forest fires ongoing in the Nilgiri Hills. In the next one, we will be looking at a very important piece of editorial on the Indian Ocean region. And in the next one, we'll be looking at a very interesting phenomena, but also a very worrying phenomena of ocean fevers. And this is related to the warming oceans due to the global warming scenarios. And finally, we will be wrapping up the session with a very important term, that is Anthropocene, which is the next era of the geological timescale of the Earth. As discussed, the very first topic that we have is with reference to India and EFTA's TEPA. Now there are various terms here, I understand you may be confused, but let me break down one by one. See, the very first term is TEPA, that is the Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement which India has signed with the EFTA. Now this EFTA is a free trade agreement between 4 European countries. Right, the 4 European countries will be looking into, but majorly what it actually signals is that India has signed FTA with collectively 4 countries from the European region, and this is a very significant FTA and also a special FTA, and the special parts also we will be looking through. See, this is very important from prelims perspective, because prelims is having this economic and social development aspects, where we also need to look at FTAs and the FTAs that India also have signed recently. Next, in GS2 we have the aspects of international relations. So also in aspects or in answers of IA or in GS2 answers concerning international relations, we also need to quote sometimes the economic relations that India has with various nations. So also this is a very significant news that we can link to the same. And finally, GS3 has Indian economy, and also in the Indian economy we have something which is known as the external sector. So this is also a very significant news when it comes to India's external sector. Now, starting our very topic with EFTA, this actually stands for the European Free Trade Association countries. Now these are the countries of Norway, Ireland, Liechtenstein and Switzerland. Now these 4 nations, let me tell you, are not a part of the European Union that you are already aware of. So these 4 nations are not part of the EU, but they are part of the EU's economic, or say, European single market. So imagine that the European Union or the entire Europe is a very big market, offering their restaurants, cafes, shops, malls and so on. But the thing is that within the EU, these 4 countries are not part of that, but within the market of the European nations, these 4 countries are part of, right? So we have to understand that this is an association between the 4 countries which was founded in the 1960s, and this is consisting of 4 countries, and the members, let me tell you again, are a part of the single market and also something which is known as Schengen area, which we have already covered in the previous Analysts. To summarize this, imagine the Europe is an entire region, right? And imagine you getting a ticket to, say, Switzerland, and you also want to visit Germany. You also want to visit from Germany, France and so on. So you need for that only single visa, right? So all the countries which are a part of the Schengen area, and all of the countries are obviously European nations, if you have the Schengen visa, you can freely move across the countries in the particular area of the European nations who are a part of the Schengen area. Now these 4 countries are also a part of the Schengen area, are a part of the European single market, but let me repeat again, they are not part of the European Union Customs Union, right? Okay, now coming back to economic, the very economic agreement that India has signed with EFTA, right? These negotiations actually started 15 years ago, and recently, if you can also observe that India has recently signed very significant FTAs with Australia, with UAE, and also with respect to countries such as the United Kingdom and also collectively the European Union. The negotiations are at a very advanced stages. So The EFTA and Indian FTA, which was signed recently, is also coming on the heels of a successful streak of India's negotiations with respect to FTAs. Now, FTAs, the free trade agreements, are what? These are very basic agreement of economic cooperations between two entities. This can be two countries, this can be one country and association of countries like this. It can be some other associations that India also has FTA with, such as the ASEAN, right? ASEAN nations of the Southeast Asian countries. So it can be that India and the other association of country or countries, they are having an agreement where they have told that okay, on 99% of the goods we will be not having any customs, any tariffs, or even if we have tariffs, these tariffs will be very low. Why, if you may ask? Because India and also most of the countries in the world are a part of the World Trade Organization, which tells that you cannot have trade barriers if you want to promote an open economy, because it will be good for your exporters too, because your exporters will be freely exporting your goods and services, which will be leading to the GDP increase of your own country, and also it will be leading to the betterment of other countries too. So it is better to not have any trade barriers, and if you are having, the barriers must be very low, right? So this is a philosophy, this is a principle of an open economy advocated by the WTO, and that is why the countries are actually free to engage with the other countries with reference to free trade agreement, where most of the goods and services on which the countries have actually negotiated on are actually having almost zero free, or say zero tariffs and customs. Now this will be depending on the negotiations that the two countries will be having. Okay, now mainly with reference to this EFTA, India and the TEPA, we have major pillars on which the agreement has been brokered. Firstly, investment, trade in goods, trade in services, sustainable development, and the intellectual property rights. Now also you can see in this particular infographic we have further subdivisions within the same, such as we are also talking about in this FTA: infrastructure, manufacturing, machinery, pharmaceuticals, chemical, transportation, logistics, banking, insurance, food processing, and research and development. Now what are all these? These are all the areas that India and EFTA have actually agreed to frame FTA. Now let us individually look at as to what they actually agreed upon. See, the very first thing we have to understand that India since 2014 and 15 has been promoting a very important initiative that is known as Make in India, because Indian government and the authorities, they want that the domestic manufacturers, the foreign manufacturers, they must be setting up shop in India, because India has a very large labor force and India has a very potential for reaping the demographic dividend going forward. That is why Indian government has thought that we can set up some manufacturing industries within the country itself, and this FTA is also looking onto the same thing, because this FTA is telling that there will be a target of $100 billion of investment that will be coming from the EFTA countries to India. Plus there will be also an obligation of creating 1 million jobs over a 15-year period. Now this 15-year period is actually the period on which this FTA's performance will be actually evaluated upon, and this is the criteria for investment. But we have to understand they have two conditions. The countries have told that okay, there are two conditions only. If these conditions are fulfilled, we will be continuing this investment and creating jobs, right? The first condition is that obviously if the EFTS countries are investing in India, they want a stable reforms, right? They want a stable rate of return of their investment, and that is why they told that if India's GDP will be growing at around 9.5% annually or around in this range, we will be continuing our investment. And also the return on the investments must be around, or say more than 16% annually over the 15-year period. Now there is a clause in this agreement which tells that if India is not growing at this rate, and if the returns that the EFTA countries are not getting around say 16% or less than 60%, they can reduce the investment, right? And also India, in return for this investment, they will do what? India will be totally opening their exports and import sector to the EFTA goods on which the goods have been negotiated on. contingent on these two conditions. And the trade in goods, the next pillar that we can understand, the trade in goods will be majorly benefiting the EFTA exports. I mean, the 4 European countries, they will be exporting something to India. Though something can be in the reference of seafood such as tuna, salmon and so on, that you lovingly will be having some sandwiches of, right? Then fruits such as olives, because these countries, these European countries have a good production of olives and some other European food such as avocados and so on. Then it will be actually exported to India. Then we have also olive oil, we have also cod oil, which is actually a kind of a fish oil, which is also a very, very demanded product in the Indian states. So these things will be increasing in imports from the country, so they will be benefiting. Then also the tariffs on cut and polished diamonds will also be reduced by India, and so the EFTA countries will be getting them at a cheaper rate. Also, for respect of wines, right, there has been a separate agreement with respect to wines. India has actually cut the tariff rate of wine, of European wine, that will be coming from these 4 countries. Then gold and dairy, soya, coal, they have also been exempted from India's concession tariff list. Now India actually maintains a kind of a list of items that India will be imposing tariff on. So these items have been excluded with reference to the EFTA, this TEPA agreement. Now also with reference to the trade, Indian exports to EFTA. Now Indian exports, whatever the exports are from our own country to the EFTA nations, these exports already have the most favored nations, which is a status given by the WTO. Remember that WTO promotes free trade. I told you in the very beginning that WTO will never want tariffs and barriers on trade, because WTO wants free trade and good and better GDP growth of all countries. So WTO tells that if any one country is, for example, say is having 10% tariff rate with another country B, it means that if you are a member of WTO, you cannot have discriminatory tariff with only one country of say 10%, and with another country you are imposing 5%. So you are doing some discrimination. This is not allowed in WTO. The WTO has told that if you are imposing any tariff, be it 10%, be it 5%, it has to be uniformly applied with all the WTO members, right? So the EFTA nations, the 4 nations, have actually extended the most favored nations status to India, and their tariff rate is actually very, very negligible. So this is also another aspect of the FTA here. Now also with reference to trade in services, the main benefits that India will be getting is actually with reference to the yoga practitioners, then practitioners of traditional medicine such as Ayurveda and so on. They will have easy access of movement from India to EFTA nations. Also with reference to very high skilled Indian professionals in the IT sector and in the management sector, they will be easily having access to visa application and of between these 2 nations. Now the last 2 pillars are with reference to sustainable development, because for the very first time India is having such an FTA with a particular nation which is having the norms of proper labor standards, proper industrial standards, which are actually environmental friendly. Because so far, India being a developing country, India did not want it to adhere to such norms which are qualitative in nature. Now quantitative nature are actually known as the tariffs, customs and so on, which are prevalent in the world trade. Now qualitative barriers to trade are actually in terms of say labor standards, such as if you are exporting any goods from India to abroad, that good cannot be manufactured by a child laborer, and it makes sense. Also the kind of exports from India which is having more and more carbon footprint, or say the production required much carbon dioxide emission, that is pollution. So these are also the standards which some developed countries sets, that these are the standards below which we will be not importing any goods from the other countries. So a very, very crucial aspect is that for the very first time India has included these norms which India actually did not include in other agreements so far. Next, with reference to intellectual property rights, the WTO also has an agreement with reference to the intellectual property rights, right? That is known as the WTO TRIPS agreement. Now this FTA is actually going a little ahead of the TRIPS agreement. That is, this FTA will be giving the investors which will be coming from the pharmaceutical sectors, from the capital machinery sectors from the 4 European nations, they will be having more safeguards, even more safeguards which have been guaranteed under the WTO TRIPS agreement. And let me tell you, for the very first time in the history of FTA, a binding commitment on investment promotion and job creation has been done. So this FTA is actually binding according to the government of India with reference to the investment commitments and the job creation commitment, right? Now, with this, we will be coming to our next topic, which is a very, very interesting one and a very serious one, because this is actually a case of a forest fire, right? A very early forest fire that we saw in the case of the Nilgiri areas. In South India, already by far, most forest covered areas of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu have seen fire incidents over the last few weeks, and this is a very, very important case study and also a kind of a major topic for your UPSC prelims. Firstly, because we have the general issues on environmental and ecology, and here forests are a very, very big component of your prelims questions too. Next, under GS3 we have conservation, environmental degradation and so on, and forest fires will be coming under the same. And finally, GS3 also has a disaster management and disaster aspects of various solutions with respect to disasters, the issues and the so on. So the forest aspect, the forest fire will be also a kind of a disaster. Now, to understand first, let us first define what is a forest fire. See, it is an unplanned, uncontrolled and unpredictable fire in the areas of combustible vegetation. See, forest fires sometimes are quite natural, because fires can be triggered by natural causes such as lightning, such as very, very high atmospheric temperature, such as too much of heat, right? Too much of temperature. Also, very, very low humidity. When we have low humidity in the atmosphere, it means that the area is actually very, very dry. And if the area is dry, the leaves, the leaves of the tree, they will be also dry. And whenever you have dry leaves and you try to strike a fire, it will easily catch fire, right? So the ease of catching fire will be, with respect to the leaves, will be taking place during a very, hot and, less humid condition in the forests. And this is actually a natural condition. But it can also be an human made issue too, when for example there are many tourists which go into the forests, right? And there are also some forest conservation officers, some people, some tribal sections of the population who reside within the forest, but they do not take proper care of the forest. For example, say they practice some cultivation such as jhum cultivation, which is a kind of a subsistence agriculture, right? Also, there are some peoples, like say tourists, who light campfires but forget to douse the fire. There are also people who smoke cigarettes and beedies, right, in the forest, and just throws away the cigarette butt in the forested areas, and gradually this sparks a tinder of fire, and this spreads with the condition of wind and this unfavorable environmental conditions, and eventually striking the entire area and alight with fire. So this is actually what a forest fire is actually consisting of. Let me tell you, it is very, very unplanned. You do not know what is a forest fire and when it will be striking, and it is also very, very uncontrolled. You cannot generally control it, and also it is very, very unpredictable in this nature. Now if you see with respect to India, and according to the India State of Forest Report 2019, you can see around 62% of the Indian states, right, are prone to forest fires. And also, if we take account of all the forests areas that India has, 36% of the Indian forests are actually fire prone. If you can see, the northeastern part of India is actually having more areas which are extremely fire prone, right? And we have to understand that there is a particular season of forest fire in India, that is actually from November to June. And the worst season, actually the season during which we see the most amount of forest fire, is actually from April to May. And also, according to recent reports, we find that there is in the last 20 years there is actually a 10-time increase of forest fire related incidents taking place in India. And part of it we can also attribute to climate change, because we find that with climate change, with global warming, the temperatures across the areas, across the vast areas of India, they also rise, and this fills this heat condition that actually is required for forest fire. That is a natural condition. Second condition is the lowering of the humidity, right? Specifically during these months, say the transition months from winter to spring to summer, these are the months we generally do not have much rainfall in India, and this is also a condition associated with the forest fire, that is dryness. So the more climatic conditions is becoming erratic, the more incidents of forest fire we will be seeing in the near future. And when a forest fire has taken place, specifically in the Nilgiris area as of now, it is also raging as of now as I'm speaking. There is also this effort by the Indian Air Force of dousing the fire. That is, carry some water over the fire and release the water. How they're doing it? They're doing it with the help of an helicopter, which is the Mi-17V5 helicopter. And this is a very, very, interesting incident. They do what? The helicopter has actually a rope, a long rope which has been attached to it. And the rope has a very, very large basket, right? Now what the helicopter does is the helicopter will be going over a particular water body such as this. You can see this is the water body here. The helicopter will be lowering its height and will be letting the bucket go into the water, and the helicopter will be again going up and hence filling the bucket full of water. And then the helicopter will be flying off to the region where there is forest fires which is raging here, as you can see in the picture, and it will be dropping the bucket water on the top of the fire. So this is actually one way in which the Indian Air Force is actually helping combat the fire. But let us look at what is the reason for the recent forest fires as of now. Generally, according to forest officials and the various forest conservationist experts, they're telling that it is generally due to human carelessness, due to cigarettes, due to campfires, due to the burning of debris in the vicinity of the forest areas. And also, apart from this, there are some other factors also which has helped spread the forest fire to a very, very large extent. Firstly, hot and dry temperatures. See, the southern part of India since February, they have seen increasing amount of temperatures. And let me tell you, February was the hottest ever February since 1991 for the South Indian states. And that is why this gave the conditions of dryness and the hotness. Also, we can see that if the overall environment is kind of hot and dry, don't you think that the leaves will also become dry and they will be becoming combustible? And that is why the forests, they got this early availability of dry biomass. Biomass refers to the dry leaves, the dry woods that are generally very, very combustible in nature. Okay, now the next reason is actually the very, very high density of tree that we also find in the Nilgiri areas, right? The Nilgiri areas are having, kind of this mixed evergreen and also deciduous features of forests, and we can find that the canopy of the trees are also very, very dense. So this will be actually aiding the spread of the fires. And lastly, the condition which actually was the most favorable was clear sky conditions and winds. Winds actually help the spread of fire. If you can understand logically that fire from one tree can be transmitted to trees which are, say, located 10 to 15 kilometers away just by the occasion of a calm wind. Okay, now see, forest fires are definitely harmful for the environment, right? Firstly, we understand that once a forest fire takes place, it destroys everything that is located in that forest, be it animals, be it plants, be it the species which are present, which are the very important species, right? The conservation species and so on, they are all destroyed in just one go, right? Apart from that, when the trees are burned down, the trees' roots also die. When the roots become loose, the soil also become loose, and this also leads to soil erosion. And finally, obviously the smoke from the trees, the smoke from the dry biomass from the forest fire will be definitely leading to air pollution in the nearby areas. So these are the negative effects of the forest fire. See, on the other side, do not always think that if something is negative, that never can be positive, right? There are some ecosystems in the world, right, which actually need forest fires, such as the grasslands, typically the savanna grasslands. Now, some of you in the comment section, let me know that where this savanna grassland is actually found in the world. Now, see, this savanna grassland is actually very forest fire prone, and it is actually good because the forest fires will also be wiping out any diseases, any pest diseases, any fungal diseases for the plants. Next, it will be also renewing the forest flow, because we have to understand, whenever we find that the trees are totally burned down, we have a new forest flow, and this will be giving a totally new area for the forest. Next, this can also benefit trees because it will be burning some trees and it will be reducing the competition for other trees in the forest, and this is why some forest fires can be kind of beneficial, but mainly we find that the negative effects are more severe. Now, that is why we have to combat forest fires. Firstly, we can do something which is actually by the name of forest fire line. This is actually designating the areas of forests which are very forest fire prone, and this can be found using the historical records of forest fires which have taken place before. Now, what the government can do, it can create a forest line in the forest fires to demarcate that these are the areas which are very forest fire prone. So what the government can do, government can timely monitor, the government can remove the forest litter which are very combustible and which can actually eventually lead to future forest fires. So creating this line will be making the government taking informed steps. Now, next is about creating fire breaks or ditches. Now, what are these? For example, say these are the various trees in the forests, right? And let us have a gap. Let us have a gap between the other trees of this forest. Now, this gap will be doing what? This gap will be preventing the forest fires from here to be actually transmitted to the other trees which are separated by these gaps. These gaps can be in fire breaks or ditches, right? And that is why this will be preventing the spread of the forest fire. Next, the Forest Survey of India is also right now using the satellite imaging technology like the MODIS, which will be looking into the radio sensitive areas of the forest fires. This will be preventing the further spread of forest fire by detecting them using sensitive radio technologies from the space directly. And finally, the IMD must be having accurate weather predictions of the summer conditions, of the temperature conditions, humidity conditions, to actually aid forest conservation officers to have control on the forest fires. In the next one, we will be looking at a very important piece of editorial on the Indian Ocean region. Now, this IOR actually stands for the Indian Ocean region, and let me tell you, with respect to any editorials, what you can do is you can read the editorials if you think that you have the knowledge and the understanding of the same. And also, after you have read, do also note down the name of the author, because you can use the author and in this case his views in your answers on the IOR or Indian Ocean region or any editorial on any other topic. Now here, the main context is that both the Western Indian Ocean and the Northern Indian Ocean have become active geographies again. By active geographies again, it means that these geographies of the Western and the Eastern Indian Ocean have been again in the news for the various geopolitical issues, and this is very important for GS2, especially on the policies and the politics of the developed and developing countries on India's interests. And here, now before beginning the main core topic, let me introduce you to a very small premiere on the Indian Ocean. Now you see, look at this map, you can see that Indian Ocean is located here, and this ocean is actually the Pacific Ocean. So we have, if we can divide Indian Ocean into two parts, that is the western and the eastern sector of the Indian Ocean, we generally can be coming up with this line, right? On the western part, we have the Eastern African nations, right? On this line, we have Pakistan, Iran, and so on. Specifically, we also have the Gulf nations located on this coast. We also have to the west, to the eastern Indian Ocean. We have countries like India, the ASEAN nations, and also Australia. Also, the eastern Indian Ocean is bordering with the Pacific Ocean here. And the Pacific Oceans, you know that it is the home to China, Japan, Australia, and also some of the South Asian nations, and most prominently the US. And that is why we find that at the intersection of the Indian and the Pacific Oceans, there is a very, very boiling contentious discussions and debates and issues of international relations. Now see, if you can again look at this particular map, you can look that this region is having a very, very prominent set of economic activity. The very first is actually, you can see the dark blue line. If you can see, these are the sea lanes of communication. These are known as the shipping lanes, which actually transport oil, gas, and various goods and services across the oceans, across the maritime oceans. And these are actually transporting goods and services, say, from the European regions, from the Gulf countries, from and to the African nations, via nations such as India and the South Asian nations, to even this particular regions of the Southeast Asian nations and the Australian continent too. Then further, also we find the sea lane of communication from the Indian Ocean is also going further to the Pacific Ocean and further to the North and the South American continents. And also, from the sea lanes itself, we can also observe that there are many choke points. Choke point means these various areas of Strait of Malacca, Sunda Strait, Lombok Strait, and we have the Bass Strait, we have Bab el Mandeb, and the various choke points which you can see are marked in red. Now this map you can also find out in the handout for further insight on this map, a very, very important map for prelims too. Now this strategic choke points means that a lot of world's trade volume is actually going through these small areas on the global map, specifically in the Indian Ocean. And also, the very third aspect of this is actually there are many island nations such as Maldives, Seychelles, the Chagos Archipelago, and the various island countries which are located in this part of the world, in this part of the Indian Ocean. So here, we have to understand, the author actually is telling that there is a kind of a shifting dynamics of geopolitical power and security concerns in the Indian Ocean. Prominently, if you can observe, India's foreign policy in 2021 was primarily concerned with the Indo-Pacific region, that is, the intersection of the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. Now, India in 2021 saw this region in the larger ambit which the US also saw the region as. US saw the region of Indian Ocean region as an extension of the Pacific Ocean. But right now, we have to understand, India cannot look at that ambition only. India has to see Indian Ocean in isolation, that is separated from the Indo-Pacific too. While the Indo-Pacific viewpoint is very, very valid because of the sea lane communication of the various choke points that we just saw right now, but Indian Ocean in itself is also something that India needs to look at and tackle separately, because primarily of very, very one important reason, that is China. Because recently we had a very, very important and serious conflict and kind of an issue with an island nation, Maldives. We are all aware of the news, right? What happened between India and Maldives recently. And that is why it is told that Maldives is becoming increasingly close to China. And this is a very, very important security challenge to India, because just located below India with reference to the geological latitudes and longitudes, Maldives is at the very hub of the sea lane communication. If you can see here, Maldives is located at a very, very important hub of the important sea lane communication. And here, if China is trying to entice Maldives and bring it closer to China, it will be a very, very big blow to India's security ambitions. And this is how directly and indirectly also China is actually increasing its presence in the Indian Ocean region, apart from the direct presence such as sending Chinese merchant vessels, defense equipments to the Indian Ocean region. And also China is also trapping some nations using debt, such as Sri Lanka. So China gave Sri Lanka huge loans, and when Sri Lanka is not able to pay back the loans, China is taking back the assets of Sri Lanka. And this is how this debt trap diplomacy is also taking place, and increasing presence of China indirectly in the region. Next, the strategic investments and the military agreements with countries like Maldives is also something that India is seeing with a heightened cause of concern. Now, apart from the Chinese factor, we also have two other factors. Firstly, we know that there is this conflict which is going on in the Israel and Palestine, and this is actually becoming a very, very permanent conflict now, because we are not seeing any ease of violence or ease of violence and conflict in the Israel and Palestinian region. And this is indirectly affecting what? The cargo, the ships which are passing through the Suez Canal. And if this Suez Canal, due to the tensions in the Israel-Hamas region, is seen, so the volume of trade will be coming down in this region. And mostly many countries are actually routing the entire world economy through the African continent, through the Cape of Good Hope, right? And this is actually increasing the cost for the various exporters, various business people. And that is why we find that now this Indian Ocean region is in the viewpoint as of now, because of also the major sea lane communication here. Next, we have also to understand that while US is with India on this China equation, on this China factor, but the rest of the West, that is the US plus the West European nations also, such as the Germany and France and so on, they are not directly coming out and confronting China, because they know that they are proximally or geographically, they are not in proximity with China, right? And that is why they feel that this geographical proximity is actually kind of a safe for them, is kind of a safe avenue for them, because they are not geographically close to China. But again, there is a kind of an issue here, because the European nations are not understanding that Chinese economic tentacles are much more wider and much more dangerous than the geographical aspects. Okay, now here, the very first thing that India can do, India's options, that in the case of here, in this, what we can understand is that India's strategic partners, specifically the US, the UK, and some of the European nations, again combined with Australia and Japan, who are actually not very close to China, not actually supportive of Chinese actions and ambitions, India must be having swift communication with the partners firstly. Second is a very, very important thing that the author of this editorial has advocated. He told that the Indian Ocean Rim Association and the Colombo Security Conclave, which are the defense, behemoths when it comes to the defense architecture in the Indian Ocean, they are not functioning properly. So we need a totally new body. Now, from his side, he has suggested a new body, which a new name also, right? The name is Indian Ocean Cooperation Organization. And this organization must be focusing on maritime security and blue economy, right? Now, there will be 4 nations from the neighborhood, which is India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Myanmar. 4 nations from the island states, which is Mauritius, Seychelles, Comoros and Madagascar, right? Now, the 9th seat will be for the Maldives. It will be, if it is, will be adopting a sensitive foreign policy, right? Now, apart from this, we have also another policy of, say, a necklace of diamonds. Necklace of diamonds. Now, necklace of diamonds typically means that we have to understand that in this entire region, India must be connecting with various nations such as Mongolia, Iran, Oman, Seychelles, Indonesia and so on, and be encircling Chinese ambitions in the same, right? And here, it can be possible with, say, investments in the rest of the countries, and also with the projection of naval power. As of now, India is actually ranked 7th in the world with reference to naval power. If India is aspiring to be a $5 trillion economy, it must also be investing in the naval resources of the country too. And that is why we have to understand that this particular aspect of, say, security on the maritime domain in the Indian Ocean becomes very, very important. In the next one, we'll be looking at the ocean fever, which is a term in the news as of now, because since March 2023, the average daily sea surface temperature has been off the charts. This is a very, very important topic for prelims and also GS1. From the geography part, we have important geophysical phenomena. Now see, look at the very charts here. If you can look, the charts are telling that the sea surface temperature during March, it is increasing, right, on an historical trend. But here we have to understand that this is actually the 2023 year. This is actually 2024, and the rest we can see these are the previous years. As you can see, with respect to the previous years, the temperatures, the sea surface temperatures, the average temperatures were in the range of 20 to 20.5 degrees Celsius. But if we can look at the 2023 sea surface temperature, it is actually little higher. The 2004 to 24 temperatures are even further higher than the 23 levels. So we can understand that the oceans are actually having fever. That means the oceans are actually warming up. Now, what are the reasons of this ocean warming? Firstly, due to the pollution of the industrial sections of the population of the country and also manufacturing processes, which release a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and this has been releasing since the industrial revolution from the 1960s and 70s onwards, right? The amount of CO2 which is being emitted is increasing, and you know that CO2 is a greenhouse gas, and greenhouse gas actually do what? They trap heat, and they trap heat within what? The Earth's atmosphere, so that the heat cannot escape. The heat, after reflecting the atmosphere, it comes back and makes the Earth more warm, and this is what leads to global warming. And if it is leading to global warming, the oceans are also having this warming phase. Also in 2023, we find this El Nino kind of phenomena taking place in the global scenario, and El Nino is actually the warming of waters on the Pacific Ocean side of the Latin American nations. Now, also another important and interesting fact is that sometimes and also major of the times, from the Sahara Desert, a large amount of dust actually flows across the entire world. And this actually serves as a giant umbrella from the sunlight, because the dust blocks the sunlight from actually going on to the oceans, right? But as of now, recently we are seeing that this dust is also decreasing in its frequency, and hence the umbrella is being lifted, and the direct sunlight is coming onto the oceans. Now, why are rising sea surface temperatures are a cause of concern? Firstly, it is affecting the ocean stratification. Now, if you see the ocean, if you understand the ocean layers and the levels, we find that on the very top layers of the ocean, right, we have very warm waters. And also we know that as we go down, right, the nutrient level of the oceans also they increase on a usual day. But with warming waters, right, this total stratification is totally disturbed, right? Usually the ocean waters mix. The cold waters actually present at the bottom of the ocean, and the warm are actually at the top of the ocean. They generally mix. But when the waters become more and more warm, the mixing of waters become very difficult, and this leads to increase in ocean stratification, and this leads to warming waters. And warm waters are actually less soluble, and they cannot take in further CO2 from the atmosphere, right? And also this also leads to the reduction of dissolution of oxygen in the waters too, and it leads to a depletion of oxygen, and it leads to affecting the marine life. Then when we only talk about marine life, we find that the nutrients due to this ocean stratification impact is actually affected directly. Then also the phytoplanktons, they cannot thrive properly, and these are actually at the very base of the say sea ecosystem, ocean ecosystem. From these only the various other creatures in the ocean, they will be getting their food, and if they are affected, the entire ecosystem will be affected. Then also we find that, yes, as of now we find a lot of coral bleaching taking place, a lot of migration of fish and water birds that are actually also seen, and this is not a very good sign due to warming oceans. Next, also according to the IPCC 2021 reports, the marine heat waves are also right now being increasingly seen due to warm ocean waters. Now, what are marine heat waves? These are actually the warm water conditions that are seen for at least 5 days, in which the normal ocean temperatures and also with the same atmospheric temperature is rising for more than 3 to 4 degrees Celsius, right? Apart from this, the warm waters is already much more warmer than before, and that is why the evaporation can also take place at a far more rapid rate, right? And this will be leading to further more and more intensive storms such as hurricanes, cyclones, and so on. So more and more extreme weather events will be seen in the coming days, and this will be impacting the island nations and also the major community. In the next one, we'll be finally wrapping up the session with Anthropocene, which is a term which is seen in the news, and as of now, Anthropocene epoch declaration is unlikely soon, but the concept of Anthropocene is actually living on. A very, very important topic under Indian and world geography, and also the issues on environmental and ecology too. Now see, we have studied geological time scale in our basic geography books, right? We have seen that since the formation of the earth, that took place in the Hadean geological scale, right? We have come very far as of now. We are right now in this phase, right? We are right now in the Cenozoic era, right? And here we are further in the Cenozoic era, we are in the epoch of Holocene, right? Now Holocene is this epoch that we are actually living right now, that we these human beings are right now, but we have to understand, we have come from Hadean age, Archean, Proterozoic, and so on, and through these entire times we saw that there have been many cases of say new animal species coming up, new origin of life taking place. There is this rise of dinosaurs in this particular era, right? Also along the same path we have seen that there have been many also mass extinctions which also took place. That is the very first mass extinction which took place in this era, then the second, then the third, fourth, and fifth. So far we have seen 5 mass extinctions, or in which almost 80%, almost 90% of the species which were living in the world, they were wiped out due to natural say causes, meteor causes, weather changes causes, and so on. So this is the general geological timescale that we have. Now this is actually systematic chronological dating of the basis of the rock structure in the world, right? Now let me tell you, this is not with reference to the living species which evolved over a period of time. No, this geological time scale is actually the study of the changes that took place in the rock of the earth so far, right? So generally we have 2 studies here. First is chronostratigraphy, which studies the rock strata, the layers of the rocks from time to time, and also a geochronology, which is a scientific branch of geology that aims to determine the age of rocks. So geological timescale is generally look at 2 things. Now also within this we have 2 international organizations. Firstly, the most important one, that is the International Union of Geological Sciences, which will be precisely defining the chronostratigraphical ages and the units. Next we have the another body which is under this only, which is known as the International Commission on Stratigraphy, which will be looking into the various conditions and criteria for the age of rocks. Now here see, since industrial revolution from the 1950s onwards, we find that the CO2 concentration with time has increased. The northern hemisphere, which is having the average sea surface temperature, they are increasing, as we also have seen the previous topic too. Next, The water use, they have also increased. The loss of tropical rainforest, they have also increased. So you can see the impact of human activities on the earth resources and the various things that the earth has, they are being impacted due to human beings and their activities. And this is very prominently seen typically after the say industrial revolution. As also you can see that according to recent researches, these are all the places of the earth where the rock structure of the earth in these places have totally changed. This means that we have actually transitioned from the Holocene era to a new era altogether, which is an era marked by human activities, which is known as Anthropocene, which is actually a term. For the very first time, it was given by Paul Crutzen, the 1995 Nobel Prize winner for discovering the ozone hole. Now, some of you again in the comment section, you tell me what do you mean by ozone hole and where is this particularly seen in the world. Now, Paul Crutzen termed this term Anthropocene to typically refer to the time period of the earth where we see lots of human activity affecting the earth, right? Now, Anthropocene Working Group of the Subcommission of the Quaternary Stratigraphy, they actually voted that we are still in the Holocene era, but recently, actually they voted on March 4, 2024, they rejected the idea of Anthropocene. They said, they actually told that we are still in the Holocene era, but we have this very first marker that we see that there are various regions in the world are actually having their rock structures changed due to human alternations, right? Firstly, we can see there are various markers for Anthropocene as to why this idea is actually true, that in fact we have actually, for example, say transition from Holocene to Anthropocene era. Now, what are the reasons? Firstly, the temperatures are rising, as of now we all know. Next, there is a quickening extinction of various species that took place just after human beings went across the globe. Firstly, we can also see the case of dodo, which is kind of a bird species. We have also seen many species of tigers going extinct, right, especially in the Indonesian regions. So we have seen many quickening extinction species. Next, we also saw the erosion and denudation of continents, specifically with respect to these parts that we can also see here. And also, there is a rapid land use change, such as using land for agriculture and, then using land for rapid urbanization, exploiting water resources. These are all changing the rock structure and the essential geological construct of the earth. So that is why mainly we find that this particular era of the world is is actually known as the Anthropocene age, right? Now with this, I thank you all for being a very patient audience. It was a lovely interaction with you all. Till the next time, all the very best, and do attempt the quiz which is following up now.